Hi, welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Jenny Kanzler. Hi, Jenny. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you doing, Craig?
Great to have you on the show. So I want to start off by showing people some of your work. Um, and I selected some pieces from your website that I thought were just great representations of the kind of work that you do. So this one I thought was just it really drew me in. Can you tell me a little bit about this piece?
Well, this piece is it started out as actually a cyborg piece. I had a mother and child relationship, where it was a robot mother and a robot baby. That was the idea. But it turned into something a little more personal. It started to be about my own mother and her relationship with my sister. And I was trying to convey this sense of, connection and disconnection simultaneously.
Mhm. It really seems heavily psychologically loaded to me.
It is. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, there are many layers there. It's also obviously, you can't do a mother and child painting without a Madonna and child reference. And then I layered in a little bit of fairy tale and folklore and
Mhm.
my personal story. So all of it blended together. So it's Rapunzel's mother. It's,
Mhm.
Goldilocks. It's, you know, the child that's lost and has returned.
For me,
And
one of the things that I was attracted to is it reminded me of the Renaissance drawings where they would draw children, but they would almost make them look like adult faces, but with children's
oh yeah,
bodies.
yeah,
So I kind of got that vibe from
right,
this.
right. I love those. What's the word for that? It's starts with an H.
I don't know. I'm going to do
Oh, that
that's a thinker.
homunculus.
First one to come up with that answer, put it in the comment section. So this piece I also really loved, and I want to ask you about really surrealism. Like, is surrealism an influence for you? Is it something that you put into
Oh,
your works with thought, or does
absolutely.
it, or is that completely opposite?
I think it comes in two ways, actually. One just being, generally drawn to surrealism, and I love Max Ernst and Dorothea Tanning and um, Remedios Varo, and many of those pieces really speak to me. But also just making a concerted effort when I'm painting to get into the kind of logic that happens in dreams and the kind of seeing that happens in dreams, because it's I'm very interested in accessing that deeper thought process that underlies the human experience.
First time I saw your work, dreams were the first thing that sort of popped into my head, and I was curious, do you paint your dreams, or do your paintings end up in your dreams?
It's interesting you should ask that. I've never had a dream about one of my paintings. I actually just this year painted something that was in a dream. I was having a dream about a thrift store full of various items, and I found an electric eel lamp. And I woke up and I was really excited by the thought of finding something like that, and so I painted it. But that's the only time I've ever really painted anything specifically from a dream.
This one was really dreamlike. Sorry, it was a little smaller. This one, one of the other things that I was drawn to in your work was actually sort of the sense of humor. The idea that pictures can solicit emotions has always been represented, but it's very few that I find that actually have the ability to make me chuckle or laugh. And this
Oh,
was really one of it. It's the little dress on the little bird that really does it for me.
yeah.
I
That's
really,
the last thing I painted. And a lot of times in my process, I'm working and I'm, sort of stumbling through all these different parts, trying to fit it together like a puzzle. And then there's this moment, where I might get a pang of, pain, or I laugh out loud. And then I'm like, okay, that's the story's there. Like, that's my cue that I need to stop moving things around and finish the piece.
Well, I could see in this picture that would be the last thing, because you always want to leave them with the laughing at the end, right? So
Right.
I
Hopefully.
could see that happening. There's
Yeah.
also, I found lots of children references.
Yes. Yes.
So where does that really stem from?
I think it's, a similar interest in trying to get at more base emotional experiences of the world, and how kids have this very honest, raw reaction when they interact in the world. And, also the wonder that comes about when you don't feel like you know everything, and you go through your life, learning about things with an open mind.
Tell me about this picture, because I kept
This
coming
one,
back to this picture.
this one is called Red Rover, and
Okay.
it is very specifically about an experience of playing that game in the gymnasium when I was a kid, and the part of the game where you're being called out for your attributes.
Mhm.
And the agony of wondering what is going to be called, and if you fit into this category or that category. So it's about, social discomfort, and also, a game that's not a game.
How big
And
is this picture?
that's 4 by 5 feet. That one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was also drawn to the fact that your work has storyline in it, and the story doesn't come out right away always with them. Your work, the more I looked at your work, the more it kind of grew on me, and I was just fascinated by the inclusion of story. That's not something that's sort of common in a lot of today's work. So yeah, it was great to see this. So let's begin with sort of the basic questions that I've got here. Um, can you tell me, what was your first exposure to art as a kid?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, my mother was a painter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so she was always drawing with my sister and I, and she would color in a coloring book, but she could make red velvet
Mm.
outfits out of crayons. I mean, what she could do just with crayons blew my mind.
Do you have your mother's work? Do you
I
possess
do.
it? Yeah.
I do. I have,
Is it hanging in your house?
it's hanging. I have about 40 to 50 pieces in my
Okay.
house. And
So
some of
it was
them.
your mother's work was your first exposure to art?
Yes. And then there was a Bible with a holographic cover that my grandparents had under the coffee table in their living room. And I would go under the curtain of the tablecloth and look at the pictures, and there were, all sorts of paintings in the center reproduced. And there was like the slaughter of the innocents, and, the Jonah and the whale, and very dramatic, powerful images. And I felt like I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to be seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my secret spot to learn about, line work and storytelling.
That's great. I love asking artists about their beginnings, and they're always sort of like stunned when I ask them these
Right.
questions.
Well, you don't generally think too much
No,
about that,
but
but
it means
it's
so
a great
much, I
question.
think, to find out, what was that spark that really
Mhm.
started you down this path. I mean,
Mhm.
there are quite a few artists that I talk with that do come from artist families, but then there are some that are like completely opposite, and it comes as like a shock to them. So,
Yeah.
you did start out in an art environment. At what point did you find out that you or realize that you wanted to become an artist?
I think it was no realization. It was that way. My
Okay.
sister and I both were always just making art, and we just didn't stop.
Okay.
So it was a given from the beginning.
All the way through. So it slid into you slid into your education. It wasn't a question as to whether or not you wanted to be an artist.
Right. It was a question of what I would study in college, but that, and it ended up being art. But yeah, the actual fact of being an artist wasn't a decision that was made.
So I want to talk to you about process, because I always find this fascinating. I always think it's kind of an insight into the pictures themselves. I'm always curious how pictures are developed. So my first question is do you keep a sketchbook?
Always.
Always. So are your pictures always sketched out first?
No, I sketch out ideas, but not pictures. I do most of the drawing and composing, on the canvas.
Oh, right then and there
Yeah, and color mixing too. I do everything. The canvas is the palette and
is the
the
pet. I get you.
drawing and everything.
So who taught you this process of using the canvas as palette? Was that just something that you developed along the way, or did you see somebody do it and went, "Oh, that's great"?
I think I have learned from so many people, so
Mm-hmm.
many things that it's really hard to pinpoint. But I had a really wonderful high school art teacher who was also my middle school art teacher.
Hmm.
And he set me up with oil paint and just let me play with it. And to me, it was like working in clay. And it was just, I always was drawing, but the more I got interested in the paint, so I started out just doing monochromatic paintings in that way for years and years and years. I didn't do any, I was just afraid of using color. And so I think the composing and comfort with like drawing with paint came about in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as, I think I just don't have much patience for preparing for things. And a lot of my process reflects that.
So then it leads me to ask the next logical question, which is if you're working on the canvas and that's really your palette, how often do you find yourselves reworking your pictures?
Constantly,
All
all
the
the time.
time. Yeah.
They're never, to me, they're never done. They're just sort of released, but I could continue working on them.
I totally understand that. I always think of that quote. It's de Kooning who said that his pictures are never finished; they're just abandoned. And
Yes, that's a
I
great
always
quote.
liked that. I thought
Yes,
that was great.
yes,
So
yeah.
your stories tell stories, and those stories always seem paramount in the picture. Was there ever a time? Is it always been like that, or did it get bigger and bigger in that vein?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think what I'm doing is just that thing that kids do where they're like, this is my family,
Mm-hmm.
and you draw the family. It's just that and connecting it to other stories. And, at least where the figurative stuff, even when they're just objects, to me, they're characters. And I am connecting those to emotional states that are elicited by relationships between people. So
I,
there's always a kernel of some event or happening that I'm trying to convey.
mm-hmm. I can see that in your work. I didn't see it at first, but to me, the revelation was I was looking at your website and you had some paintings of cake that you did, right? So those cake paintings, I really like them, right? So the obvious first connection was a Wayne Thiebaud kind of a thing, but they're nothing like that. And I really kind of felt that at first they were sort of a little out of place, but then I realized that they fit perfectly when I looked at your work as a whole. It helped tell that story as a whole. So is that something that you're conscious of, or was that day you were just hungry?
So the cake paintings, that cake came out of a painting that was a story about a birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
A birthday party that went horribly wrong. And I actually, my good friend Max has that painting, which I'm really happy that that's in his collection. But we talked about it a lot, when I made it in grad school. But the cake became the sort of center of the story, because it was very vulnerable, just sitting there waiting to be cut, waiting for the celebration while this trauma transpired around it. And so it's, that I became more interested in doing a kind of portrait of the cake and what the cake's emotional state was. And, obviously empathizing very heavily with the cake's experience of the world.
I figured that there was a story behind the cake.
Yeah.
Do you ever actually put pen to paper and write down the stories that go along with these pictures, or is the picture itself enough?
For me, the picture is enough. And, I think there's something kind of, for me, I don't know why the word garish comes to mind, but something where I don't want to expose all of it, because it's like too much to expect of people to, I want to soften it a little bit.
Okay.
For other people. And I can do that in painting, but I can't really do that in writing. The writing is too honest.
See, I'm different, because I see your pictures, but I want to keep going. I want to know those stories. Like, I think I need to take you out for a cocktail or something and really get the art of it. So do you consider your works to really be autobiographical, or are, once they're made, are they separate?
They are autobiographical, but I'm not interested in relaying the facts. I am interested in talking to other people about what it feels like to be alive. And also, one of the most wonderful things that happens is people start telling me their stories. And we've got somehow something in the painting has connected to them, because, they might not have the same story, but they have the same feeling from their story. And that's a really wonderful thing, actually.
Do you feel that your work has changed over the years? I mean, you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of folds back in on itself.
Okay. It's cyclical, you think?
Oh, yeah. There are many threads, and everything is fodder for the next piece. So there's nothing it's more just like it's exponentially, there's so many possibilities of ways to go that often I just come back to, kind of a center point, and then venture back out, one way I've gone before, but haven't been there in a while, and see what might be on that path.
Your works really seem, I've yet to actually see them in person, but I would imagine that the work itself, the object itself, is really the point of it, like the paramount version of it. But I'm curious, do you ever make prints of your work?
Mm-mm.
Have you ever considered it?
Well, I make postcards.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, the texture, like the object itself, and same with the drawings, it's so important to me, the physicality of the paint on the surface, the ink, soaked into the paper. And I mean, if somebody wanted to print, of course they could have a print, like I don't. But for me to make that as part of what I'm offering, out to the world, it's not something that's exciting to me.
Well, I think when I take you out for that cocktail, I'm gonna talk you into becoming an etcher, because I think your pictures would make wonderful etchings,
I
carborundum prints.
Yeah.
I could see that the texture, because most people, when they think of prints, they think really flat. But when you can get into real, sort of deep white etching and stuff, you can get those same sort of textures. I think your work would loan itself really well.
Yeah.
But it also made me wonder about I was thinking about Botero and
Mhm,
his paintings.
mhm,
And
mhm.
what always shocked me in a delightful way about his work that I am curious about you is his smooth transition into sculpture.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever played with sculpture?
Yeah. My undergraduate degree is in sculpture. I started out
Ah,
doing sculpture in school.
well,
Did
that
I?
changes everything. Oh, I want to
And
see some of those sculptures.
I remember falling in love with an Ellie Nadelman sculpture that was
Uh-huh.
at PAFA actually. And I think that the sort of like tapered limbs and that the polychrome wood, the painted wood, you know, in religious art, but also in like painted wood sculptures have definitely informed the way that I'm trying to make forms with paint. And
Hmm.
I'm going for that kind of gloss over grit, over some organic material.
I'm curious to know, like, I would love to do more sculpture, but for me, it's really about space. I don't have the space for it.
It's true. It's
Do
true.
you have space for that?
Um, some, and but why did I stop doing sculpture? I did sculpture for quite a while. And then I came back to painting and it just felt so good to paint.
Mhm.
Um, that I didn't stop doing it. I did make some small sculptural pieces and made a stop action animation years ago.
That is so weird. I was just about to ask you that because I can see your figures as three-dimensional, and
Yeah.
my next thing is I really want to see them move, right? So
Yeah, I could definitely get into that. And I really enjoy the Quay brothers films and
yeah,
Jan Svankmajer and
I can see that, and I think it would work with your work because of the fact that you have such a strong storyline within your work. I would love to see that sort of expanded, and you wouldn't have to write it down. You
right.
would. um, So, uh, in your studio, in your daily artistic life, are there other artists that you're always kind of looking at, or are you always looking for new artists' work? Do you do that?
I am on Instagram a lot and I love to see what people are doing in studio shots. And, I have lots of really close friends who are artists. Max Maddox, who I mentioned before, is brilliant. I'm always waiting to see what he does next. Maggie Rosicki Hiltner is like one of my closest friends. Her work is incredible. And Jill Wasserman, another very
I
close
know
friend.
Joel.
I just, I've found I've had the good fortune to actually know some really terrific artists.
Hmm. So, is it mostly
Um,
contemporary artists that you're looking at?
uh, well, no, actually, I work now at Dumbarton Oaks, and
Okay,
so I pass a lot of Byzantine art every day and pre-Columbian
okay,
art, and I
I can
even
see
just
that.
the doorknob there, I have a very aesthetically pleasing work situation. And so I go there and I just kind of soak that environment in.
Geez, that must be lovely.
It truly
Like
is.
really like nurturing, I guess. And
Yeah,
yeah.
it very much is. And then they have like a beautiful garden too. And
So when
right next is the Oak Hill Cemetery in
okay, all right.
Georgetown, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's this very hilly cemetery. And I recently discovered that at lunchtime and have been doing some little drawings in there.
Nice. Do
That
you
have,
ever, when you're looking at those older pieces, do you ever see anything in them like a detail and it's like, oh, I'm gonna borrow that kind of
oh,
thing
yes,
all
all the
the time? That's great.
time.
Um, so I've got two more questions for you. The first one is just always for my own enjoyment, and it's a simple question. Do you have any studio rituals? Like when you go into work, do you just like work right away, or are there things that you need to do first?
Hmm. Um, well. I really like to rearrange my artwork and kind of move
Okay.
it around. So there's kind of a fussing process of just like, you know, just what does this look like with that? What goes over here? Because, you know, if I put two things together that I might not think go together, it might imply there's a third piece that could be made. And so that
Interesting.
will kind of get those in between ideas in mind.
But
And
you
then
don't work in series, do you?
I kind of think of the whole thing as a series.
Series, yeah.
But no, I guess I do. I mean, yeah, I don't work in series in an organized way, but whenever I come back to something, it's part of that. Like there are cake paintings, there are rabbit paintings, there are schoolyard paintings. So yeah.
Right. But they're all connected in one larger
Yes, but they
storyline.
might be like 10 years apart.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
So final question, question I asked everybody because I really like the answer. What does making art do for you?
Oh, that is a good question. It's the most fun game that I play. It's also meditation. For me, I have found that if I don't get to studio for whatever reason, I feel very despondent and disconnected. And it's my way of centering myself. And also it helps me if I paint and then I go out into the world, I look at things differently. And if I don't paint, that fades away over time. So it keeps my eye and my, you know, feeling of presence in the world sharp.
Mm-hmm. I know exactly what you mean. I ask that question. All the artists answer it in different ways, but it all means the same thing. Like you can't really live without it. I know if my wife has said that if she doesn't keep me, you know, in art supplies, like I go crazy. So I have to do it. So, Jenny, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. It was a real eye opener. Now I have more questions than I had before. So maybe we'll do another part 2 or something. But I loved talking with you today. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch today. Please make sure to like and subscribe so we can keep doing these. It's really most appreciated. And again, thank you to my guest, Jenny, today for participating. So thank you very much, Jenny.
Thanks. That was fun.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah.